Welcome back to the Intuition Incubator. Joining us today are Jeff Benton and Brett Weinroth of Paragon Performance Evolution, a powerhouse in peak performance training dedicated to both personal and collective growth. Paragon creates customized leadership and high-performance programs that have impacted an impressive array of clients, from Fortune 500 companies and special forces to astronauts, professional athletes, leading academic institutions, and global first ladies. At the heart of their teaching, though, is the pursuit of a coherent flow state, an elevated state of self-regulation and heightened awareness of thoughts and emotions, allowing individuals to optimize brain function, improve physiology, and unlock greater clarity, presence, joy, and gratitude. Paragon's programs span essential topics like resilience, coherent communication, conscience and heart-centered leadership, and emotional intelligence. Jeff and Brett's holistic approach is transformative and rooted in human behavior, helping people and organizations reach new heights of success and fulfillment while they themselves explore the frontiers of what's possible in human experience. Welcome, Jeff and Brett.
Good to see you, Abby. Great to be with you.
Good to see you. I know. So we met, for the viewers, we met 3 years ago, we just figured out now, when we were all speaking at a Conscious Entrepreneur Summit. It was actually the first Conscious Entrepreneur Summit. And it was kind of like, I don't know, like I met you guys and I was like, oh, I think we were lost at birth or something. Like I just felt like super, super connected. And even though we're super busy and doing 20 million things, I kind of feel like, I don't know, could always just talk to you like, well, what's going on? So I'm super happy that you're here, and I'd love for you to share kind of with people. You guys do such incredible work, and I'd love for you to start by kind of sharing like the birth of Paragon Performance and like why it feels like a very intuitive business. Like, what was the intuitive journey of like, this is what needs to happen now?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's kind of two things. I think sometimes we have our standard line, but when we really think about it, well, I think the first thing is Brett and I have always been interested in high performance. We were both athletes. We both were executives in the sports world. And my dad was a sports agent. Brett worked for my dad for a number of years. We'll give him a shout out, Raymundo Benton. And, just always intrigued with what made somebody the best at what they did. I've always been fascinated by that. But I think really at a deeper level, for me, it was going through my own personal journey. And it was, living a very external life. I grew up with a single mother, a lot of trauma, some violence growing up. And so for whatever reason, I was conditioned to really want to look perfect to the outside world. And when that happens, we tend to, deny or ignore what's going on internally. And so my outlet was really sports. But as I got into the professional world, even though I looked pretty on paper, I really did not have the skills to cope at a deeper level. And so as I kept getting promoted or, having more and more responsibility, I would have to find other ways to recover. And a lot of times it was just like locking myself in my house on the weekend to just get ready for the next week. And it's wild how I was able to pull it off, right? Knowing what I know now. But ultimately, my mom took her life and I hit rock bottom and I just couldn't hold up the facade anymore. And so I always felt spiritually inclined. I always felt connected to something beyond myself, even in the craziest times. And so after my mom passed away, I went on a spiritual journey and I studied with monks and shamans and brain scientists and did all types of stuff, like crazy stuff. And, my mom took her life and I hit rock bottom. And I really had no idea how to move forward. I just knew I couldn't exist the way I was. And so I ended up traveling the world, meeting with shamans and monks and brain scientists and doing everything and anything just to find a new reality. And a big part of that was really feeling my emotions. I think I cried more in 6 months than I cried in my entire life. And through this more spiritual journey and really feeling into my emotions, I remember just waking up one day and feeling present. I felt joyful, and I probably felt deep gratitude for the first time in my life. And I never, ever thought I would experience that. It just wasn't in my reality. And so I remember thinking at that moment, and this was, God, almost 20 years ago, that if I could go from completely disconnected, right, and I could go to a state of presence, gratitude, joy, anybody could. And that's where I was like, okay, I want to eventually start a company, with my soul brother and really help leaders in this world, because we were dealing with a lot of leaders, because I knew if these leaders could relate to themselves differently and they would just make better choices for themselves, their families, their teams, their companies, their communities, and really humanity. And so that was really the motivation to start Paragon.
And, I love what you said, and I so appreciate, that's what I appreciate about you guys so much is the vulnerability you're always willing to show up with. And this idea of, you know, looking really good on the outside and having that be important. And, that is my story, and being able to be not only aware of it but to say it and say the damage that causes, in positive intelligence, we call that the hyperachiever saboteur. And it's so present in leaders because leaders tend to be the kind of people that have big visions. And that's kind of the beautiful qualities. But then under stress, it becomes something completely different. And then there's so much shame around that, right? I don't know about you guys, but I had so much shame around caring so much about what other people thought about me or how I looked.
Yeah. I was just going to say one more thing around that. I so agree with that. And my motto over the last few years is no performing. Shows you exactly how I am. As pushing, if I'm angry, sad, whatever it is, and really feeling into that. And what I'm finding is there's such deeper connection with that. People want authenticity and vulnerability. And, I have some amazing friends. I'm in Santa Monica. And one of my friends, Britton, always said, Jeff, come see us even if you're not in a good mood. All I mean, and it's so simple, but it had such a bigger meaning.
Yeah.
And so it's I always tell my clients to try it, right? When they're in the corporate world, I say go 0 to 5. Brett and I are entrepreneurs. We can go 0 to 100.
Right.
Bird comes down and then create the next day. But it's play around with just being ourselves. And then there's all these other gifts that we actually teach, from having real transparent conversations, authentic conversations, right? It's more than just being in coherence and being nice to somebody. It's how do you actually change relationships, right?
Yeah.
And transform it so they're serving everybody.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask you guys about coherence in a moment. But Brett, share with us sort of what your impetus was in joining this this pursuit. How long have you guys known each other?
We've known each other 30 years.
Okay.
A long time.
Long time.
Yeah, Jeff joined the team for the company his dad was leading when I was there, and so we had a chance to work together as young pups in the sports industry. It's interesting, Jeff, talking about no performing. I, as a kid and as a young adult, was so concerned with what other people thought of me, to the point where it finally just emerged in my early 30s with some health issues because I did not know how to process stress. I wanted to be a coach early on. Jeff knows the story. I mean, I wanted to be a basketball coach. I was a hoop junkie. I played hoops in high school. I wasn't good enough to play at the D1 level in college, but I was on the path to doing that for my profession, and eventually got into the sports industry, working with athletes, working with other high performers, with coaches, and supporting kind of their career paths, and seeing from behind the scenes how these well-known personalities were really human. They had their shortcomings and their faults. They were great at one particular thing in terms of their performance, but I got a chance to get a peek behind the curtain and get to know, these, get to know the humans. And it started to, you talk about intuition on this podcast a lot. And I think for me, intuitively, I sensed that was not a world that I was going to be in for very long. Even though it was at one point after Jeff and I left the company his dad started, I went to a global firm, and I was in what would have been considered a dream job. It was a dream job, and yet I was racked with fear, with insecurity, with self-doubt, and I was starting to build a family. I had a lot of life events going on, and all of a sudden I'm dealing with health issues that a young man in his early 30s shouldn't be dealing with. And I couldn't put the words to it, or even mindfulness was not part of my language back then. I did not grow up in a household where we were talking about mindfulness. There was a lot of judgment about people who were into mindfulness, but but we weren't practicing any of that. So for me, to even understand what was happening to my physiology, to my neurology, was so foreign to me. But I had a couple of panic attacks in my mid-late 30s, and when you go through those, they're wake-up calls. You kind of wonder what is happening. And fortunately, because of my friendship with Jeff, and really having a close perspective on what he was going through with his mom, and Jeff being he says he's an introvert, but he loves to share things when he stumbles onto modalities or, things that excite him. And a lot of it was observing him and seeing the changes that he was going through, and him also being vulnerable. I'm not sure back then, Jeff, you knew you were being vulnerable, but you were for me. And I was really inspired by it, and just starting to dip into that world that was very foreign to me, with basic stuff, just basic meditations, Calm app, Headspace, I had them all. And I always tell, clients, it was so hard as a type A, intense, right? Took myself really seriously. Sitting still was not something I was very comfortable with. And I decided that I was going to lean into it. So I let my competitive juices work as a benefit for the process. And I remember being with a client that was having a particularly difficult time with their board. And we got to sit in on these meetings as their consultant, and observing this very intelligent, very personable human struggle with communication, with confidence. It was visible. And I remember telling Jeff, this is what I'm observing with this client. And he said, the next time you go into this meeting, I want you to just start breathing through your heart, and I want you to send some of your calm energy to this person. Now, I hadn't been introduced to the HeartMath system yet. This is still very new. I was like, what is this Star Wars nonsense that you're? He's like, nope, I'm not going to tell you what it is. I just want you to do it. And so I tried it. And over a couple of months, I could see things got more clear to me, first of all. I was starting to pick up some things that maybe I hadn't before, but this client would come up to me after these meetings, say, that idea we were talking about, or I could just sense maybe a little bit of a shift. And I went back to Jeff and I said, okay, give me the skinny. What is this? I need to understand it. And that kind of started, my journey, and, I think our collective journey as a company to really lead with coherence. And it's been a life saver and a life changer for me. And our stories are a little bit reversed, because at Jeff's point about changing and helping and supporting leaders, how they show up was really a driving force for us, because we were around so many friends and clients who were very talented, but struggling with certain aspects of their lives. But then we kind of married it with our own journeys. And I, to that point, was still grappling with my own, transformation, if you will. Jeff had already been through the kind of the family trauma and was on the back end of, his mom's passing. I'm in the middle of mine right now, to be honest. 2020, when the world was going through a lot of change with COVID, we have, an young adult son who was starting to experience real severe mental health challenges. And that has added a lot of fuel to my purpose in the work that we're doing. So what started as how do we support leaders become more conscious, become more aware, is now coupled with how do we just support mental well-being. And I now have a personal experience as a parent dealing with a young adult child that's going through this. And it has been the greatest learning and growth experience I've ever had, and the greatest challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, as a therapist, I worked with a lot of people in that situation. I have to tell you guys that as I'm listening to you, I'm getting chills, and there's like some presence with us. It is so amazing to just hear you guys talk, because there's like a resonance of just authenticity and realness. And one of the things that you said, Brett, that just, I wanted to kind of call out was, you talk about all these people, because you guys at Paragon Performance, you work with like these really, really elite performers and stars and, like really. And I remember when I met you guys, I was like, oh my God, they work with all these people, and I think it's so common, that we have this fictitious hierarchy, that and it happened, like that's where this idea I think comes from, of this, my outside has to look this way, and this crazy hierarchy we live with, that like, oh, if you achieve this, or you're better than me, or blah, 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 blah. And like, I mean, I'm sure it's true for you guys too, but I can't tell you how many clients I talk to. And of course, my history of experiencing it myself, of just, always like, I'm above, I'm below, I'm comparing myself, or these people are, are better than me. And it's so refreshing, to talk to you guys. And I've had a number of guests on this podcast that really are touching people's lives that I would never, like, I'm not in that world, and are like just the most humblest, realest people. And I don't know, I just feel like that can't be said enough to listeners and to audiences. Like, this hierarchy that we seem to live in it's fictitious. It does not exist.
Yeah.
Like, look behind the screen of anybody's life. We've all got shit.
Yeah.
We're all doing the best we can,
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. The facade that, we tend to live behind. I ran into a neighbor a couple months ago who I hadn't really, this experience has been challenging in the sense that it takes a lot of energy. And then when you bring it up, you've got to kind of relive a lot of the, specifics when you're explaining to people. One of the biggest challenges has just been preserving our energy. My wife and I, and just not doing a lot of socializing, even though connection and community is so powerful and we get a lift out of it. I remember running into this neighbor who's a therapist, and she said, how, it was kind of the usual, walking the dogs. Hey, how you doing? Living the dream. And I just at that moment felt like I didn't want to keep up the facade anymore. And I don't know why at this early morning hour, I was like, actually, it hasn't been, the greatest the last few years. And because she started asking, how the kids doing? And I told her what was going on. And she said to me, I really appreciate you sharing that. She said, we need to talk about this more. We need to be able to share with each other these challenges that we're going through. And, as you know, mental health it still has a stigma, even though there's way more discussion, there's way more education, there's way more information about it. But we're all going through something. And one of the things Jeff and I love about the work we're doing is that it doesn't have to be pro athletes or astronauts or global first ladies. We work with real humans, and they could be HR directors at corporations or sales leaders, and we're all going, as just one of Jeff's great sayings is, we're all going through this human experience, and to be able to share it with each other and to be able to support people is a real lift. It's a real change from some of the work that we did early on, with other companies that we've, built and been a part of. The supporting and serving aspect of it is incredibly fulfilling. And that's, I think, what we love about it.
Yeah. And I was going to say, like, one of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately, just because of my own journey, like my friends always joke, I'll read 3 pages of a book and then I'm an expert. I give like read and read like the first chapter. I'm like, no, but the back is so good. So
The liner notes.
They literally like, I'm not reading it unless you tell me chapter by chapter. But one of the things we always talk about is our world is moving so fast right now, right? There's so many distractions, and I can't remember the exact quote, but Astro Teller, who was the former CEO of Google X, basically said it's the first time in human history that we're not equipped to keep up with the technological changes, right? Our brain, our nervous system. And just through some recent life events, I have like cut down caffeine, no sugar, no dairy. I've gotten off social media, and it's created this space in my life, and I'm feeling emotions at a deeper level, right? And so I think when I went through my mom's process, I did all the work and I'm like, oh, I've done it. I cried, I've screamed, and I'm good. And it's like, oh, here's the onion, right? And so it's just peeling that layer back. But we have created a society that we never feel, right? I mean, think about, and it's not just teenagers, right? Or college kids. I'm seeing 70-year-old relatives or 80-year-old relatives on their phone all the time, or on social media. And I think what's happening at a subconscious level is the first time somebody starts to feel emotions, which is just information, right, about that person, they're going to distract themselves. So they don't get to know themselves at a deeper level. And we work with a lot of senior executives. We're about to launch a 12-month program, and it's all around knowing myself. And, the first piece, and then the last piece of it is really how you can change humanity and contribute. But if we're not giving ourselves space and time, how are we ever going to know ourselves, right? And then what happens is we're just influenced by these external forces, right? And like you said, like these external forces are driven on money, status, separation, and it's really the downfall of our society, right? Something really dramatic is going to happen to be able to shift our mindset and our relationship to this beautiful planet, to others. And, I forget, I saw a study a couple of years ago, I think it was by PwC or whatever, but they basically ask people, would you change your ways now if you knew it created a better life for your grandchildren? And 90% said no, right? So because we were so right in the now. And so, one of the things we talk about with these leaders, once we get their trust, right, after we've been working with them for a while, how do we really shift consciousness on this planet for us to make different decisions? Or do we? Or is it just our fate to keep going because it's not sustainable? I don't know if it's 5 years, 10 years, 100 years, but it is not sustainable how we're going. And, I think there's a spiritual community and a little bit of spiritual bypassing of people like, sort of outside of their bodies and,
More than a little.
but it's all within us. That is the God, right? That is the micro and macrocosm of this entire universe. So yeah, we definitely live in interesting times. And I feel like Brett and I are really embracing it. Like there's a real gift to that also, whatever happens, if it ends tomorrow or 100 years from now, we live in the interesting times.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And yeah, wow. I mean, you said, well, first of all, I got a book for the back cover for you to read.
That's all. I'll prepare something later.
When you get back on social media, you'll be very, very.
Except Brett and my dad have read more books that I've never read.
Oh my God. Well, this one, no, see, part of this is like this one, it's actually a super easy read. And you could read it in 3 hours. I've actually been reading it for like 2 months because I just want to sit with each chapter. It's called Self-Observation by Red Hawk. And it's, I study with a Gurdjieff teacher, and he's obviously done a lot of Gurdjieff. He's a really, I'm late to the party. I mean, he's written a lot, but it's just like blowing my mind. I'm just like, oh my God, yes, yes, yes. Okay, stop and think and breathe. And, so, but, to your point, and also, when 93% of, people saying no about would they do something different for their grandchildren, right? Like, wouldn't we have to say that is a stress response, this self-absorption, right? Like, when we know that this whole idea of like, well, me, what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, even if I'm feeling like crap and I just be like, oh, blowing up for me, or whether it's, I deserve this, that, or the other. It's that stress response, right? That you're saying has to change ultimately.
That is when we have a whole process of evolution that we take our corporate clients through, and the number one thing we teach them is how to get out of a stress response into this more coherent state. Because if we're in a stress response, as you know, Abby, you've done a lot of this work, we are literally limited, our key brain centers, to be able to problem solve, communicate, decision making, but also have empathy and see other people's points of view, right? And so even when we work with DE&I or our partners work with the UN or G20, we're like, we can do all the legislation, we can do all the awareness, but if we don't teach people how to get out of a stress response, they are limited in their ability to see somebody else's point of view and relate. So that has to be number one. And it's the same thing what we do with teams, right? These senior teams, it's hyper competitive because they're in stress responses. So when things get challenging, they go into silos, right? And they actually look at each other as a threat. And so when Brett and I and our entire team work with these senior teams, and we teach them how to get out of a stress response and actually start to have gratitude for each other, right? Which rewires their neural networks. In 6 months, we can change a culture that's been a certain way for 20 years. And Brett was just down in Orlando. Cornell just did a little presentation. I think there was 300 higher education leaders of how we helped shift their culture in 6 months. And so that was one of the biggest things is, the leaders there say now when it's stressful and challenging, people actually come together versus going into those silos.
Yeah, the way that I describe that when I'm talking to people is that, because there's so many corporate programs out there, right? There's so many leadership programs, communication skills, emotional intelligence, 7 habits of highly successful people, there's so many. But if you don't fix the operating system, if you don't work on the machine that is the brain and the body, and you want to go and try and put that, I know that I can know you're from Mars, I'm from Venus. That's great. I know you need a little time to process. So if I need something from you, I'm going to send you an email. Hey, Brett, let's chat on Thursday about this. But if my hair is on fire because I just lost a client, I don't give a shit about what your needs in your operating. So, I don't care that you're from Mars. I'm going to charge into your office with my hair on fire. And all of the skills that we spend so much money learning through other companies, through leadership development, go out the window. Right. So you have to have this so that you can even make use. It's like putting a new program into a faulty operating system.
Exactly. Yeah. And when you see the particularly at the leadership level within organizations, when the individuals decide to lean in and take the journey,
Yeah.
really unique things happen. And it's we try to stay away from outcomes and expectations, right? We want to keep them involved in the process. We know that within the corporate structure, invariably there are going to be some people that are going to find this to not align with their belief system. And we have to have obviously compassion for those folks because they are in a stress response, but it's about doubling down on those that are leaning in and doing the work. They're adopting the techniques. They are being vulnerable in group sessions. They are curious and want to be able to bring these tools to their teams so that they can proliferate it. And when we start to go deeper within an organization over time, and those particular leaders are stepping forward more and more and more, that's when you start to see the change, even in those that are maybe resisting, because how that coherent leader shows up with their colleague who's having a difficult time and may not be, open to change, it at least changes part of the dynamic to where that instead of getting frustrated with that person or coming back with the automatic response, they're having more compassion, more empathy, and they're starting to approach things in a more creative way, right? There's more possibilities rather than the way maybe that they used to go about it. It doesn't mean that it eliminates conflict, but they're able to navigate the conflict with more ease, definitely with more grace. And it starts with the grace they're giving themselves.
Right. That's how
They get out of the perfectionist mindset and they just start to accept and let go of, control. And that is an amazing thing for us to observe. But, I believe that it's happening at an accelerated pace because we are conscious to embody this ourselves. To be able to witness the change personally and see the things that maybe got under your skin or that were more intense in the past or that threw you off balance and now you can navigate. And also, to your for the topic of your podcast, to have a higher level of intuition to decide how do I support this person in the moment. Jeff mentioned Cornell. We were with their leadership team earlier this year, and it was at the back end of a week long of activities around values and team building. And this group was pretty wiped, and we had a full day retreat planned for them. And the night before, as we were doing some prep around it, it was apparent to us that we really needed to support them maybe in a different way, that maybe we needed to go off script and really just see how they wanted to be supported for that time that we were together. And that was a good call because they really needed it in that moment. They needed just the space to be supportive for each other, for a pause for themselves. And so rather than overload them on learning, we really just, let go with the sharing and the techniques. And I don't know, about 2 breaks in, a dance party broke out. All of a sudden, like half of the group was dancing. And, you talk about the kind of energetic shift that occurs. I wish we'd have had a camera on it to document it because it was so much fun. And it really changed the dynamic of the day for this group. And it left them feeling more energized when they left than when they walked in. And this is a highly evolved group to begin with, and they're very close. But they've been through a lot of change over the last couple of years. And as you know, the university environment has been really difficult for leaders with protests and, unionization of athletic teams and RAs and TAs and graduate students and things like that. So leaders are really being challenged every day. Even those that are highly conscious and highly self-aware are feeling the weight of it all. So to the extent that, we could just support them and, I like the term the guide on the side.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's reflected in those notes we get when it's like, hey, I'm feeling a little tense about a particular situation. Can we jump on a call? Right.
Right.
And so bringing our intuition.
And then the perspective that opens up, right? When you have that call, like the hyper focus they have on what's happening, and then just a simple technique, a simple conversation, bring them out of that stress. And all of a sudden it's like,
yeah. Right.
It's such a good conversation because, when we started, we would make sure we went through all the teachings and, we wanted to we did it for ourselves, sound smart. And honestly, like companies and these senior teams are just bringing us in to hold space. We create a safe environment for people to share. And it's by far the best ultimate high performance tool. Because people are, again, because of the world we're in, they're so disconnected. We talk about this next pandemic being in a form of loneliness. I mean, people that are married with 2 kids, a white picket fence, are lonely, So to create safe space for these teams to be able to share and connect and have this human experience buys, months of more production because they just feel more connected. Like we could teach them a lot of different things, but if they're not feeling safe, right, and in that space, there's just a piece of them that's shut off.
well, and I think one of the pieces is intuition. I mean, it literally suffocates it. And what you're talking about is sort of an intuitive move in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
That makes, sense. But, speak to this, because I think a big piece of what happens is that people can get into their mind, right? Which is very different than their heart. And so you can understand that you need to, settle down, or whatever. And, safe space. Oh, that sounds great. Yep. No, we've got a safe space. It's all good. You know what I mean? But like, it's not safe and you're not able to shut your mind down. And so learning how to physiologically shift that.
Right.
And I want you guys to speak to that in a moment, but I also want to say, like, it's so profound, right? When you can, because I'm sure, there's a lot of leaders listening. They're like, okay, this is a lot of airy fairy bullshit, like I got to get down to business, and I'm sure, you have the leaders just like I do. I remember one of my clients, what's your goal? To be the best. Okay, cool. Like, let's evolve that a little bit. I hear what you're saying and you're probably right, but no, I really think, Abby, it's really just to be the best. And then 3 months later, sends me the most beautiful vision statement for her company that I literally cannot read, nor can she, without crying, like every time. And I've read it a lot of times. I use it in presentations and whatnot. And like everything falls in place from there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, and you get these notes. It's like, this has impacted my whole life, not just my business, not just my team. My wife and I are getting, along better than we ever have.
Yeah.
And you start hearing these leaders, I'm giving myself chills now. You start hearing these leaders talking about not just how their life changed, but then I got one of these yesterday, but then saying things like, I'm here to serve. And this is my mission. And I didn't even realize it, so like the ripple effect that you guys are having when you're working with these leaders who, in the beginning might be like, a safe space, we need numbers.
Right. It's a fair point. Yeah. And okay, like how much are we going to just send gratitude to one another? But that's the foundational element of it. It's when we can generate the physiological shift we can then get them into a place where they can address the strategy discussion, the conflict with an employee or a client or another team member. So when we say sometimes we just want to hold space or help them hold space, that's the foundational piece that helps to unlock the real problem solving, the decision making, the ability for them to trust their intuition, i.e. their gut, right? Because we've now aligned everything internally for them. And until they can get to that place where they feel like they're being their true selves and able to be vulnerable and feeling safe, it's really difficult to navigate the challenge, or the problem of the day. And there are, Jeff mentioned the rate of the world earlier. So there's problems of the day that have to be solved. So how do we help them get into a space where they feel like they're present, where they're letting go of the perfectionist mindset, they're letting go of the outcomes, they're letting go of let's be the best, and we have to win. And you can only do that when you get out of the linear brain and into a more aligned physiological state. That's the beauty of the coherence.
And I want you to speak to that a little bit, because I think, some people could hear this and be like safe space, and like they imagine, okay, so it's a safe space where everybody's just kvetching and unloading, and it's safe enough for me to tell you all my traumas and everything, and that's not appropriate work. And like, you're not talking about any of that stuff, right? So let's speak to, because we're all, HeartMath trainers, and this is like the crux of your business, let's speak to coherence, like help people understand what that really means. It's not airy-fairy in any sense of the meat.
Well, and for me, and I think Jeff would agree, anything that sniffed of woo-woo, I was allergic to early on in my life. So the fact that there's science and evidence and research to support all of this, right, it makes it accessible. And for many of the analytical, linear, brains that we're supporting, I think that's comforting as well. But when you get past all of that, all of the teaching piece of it, and you get them to experience what coherence feels like. Yeah. Jeff, you talked earlier about the leaning into emotions, which, by the way, is something that on my journey I've had to do more of. Because I think it was easy to say, I got all the techniques, I can shift out of sadness. Nope. Got to lean into the sadness. Got to embrace it. Got to feel it. And then know that if it lingers, that's not healthy. Let's go ahead and shift into a place of peace or calm or neutral or whatever is accessible. Right. And so when we help them get into the more optimal state, it's not like it's, we talk about values written on a wall, but when you align with it, when it's a felt sense of balance, that's when they're at their best. They may not even be able to describe what that feels like. Some might say it feels lighter. Some might say if there's more ease. Some might just say I feel more relaxed and I feel more calm, which is why we are constantly asking them, how are you feeling before a session starts, in the middle of it, at the end of it, creating more awareness, which we know helps to rewire the brain. And that's when we can then dig in deeper on this, this thing called coherence, and what does it mean, and how does it then contribute to an organization? How does it contribute to the team as a whole?
We always love to give HeartMath a shout out. Well, they're here for our success, and with Robert Browning and Sheva and Sandra, Dr. Sandra, we do a lot of work.
She's going to be on.
Oh, she is? We love her. Her and I just spoke Texas Women's Conference, and it was so much fun that they're bumping us up to a room of 4,000 in Pennsylvania next week. Cindy people loved her. So, but like what Brett said, like when to get away from the woo-woo, right? HeartMath has been a gift because they've got 40 years of science and research with Harvard and Department of Defense and Stanford
and all this peer-reviewed research. But also what's powerful is it's one of the few techniques that you can use in real time and under stressful, challenging, changing situations. This is why special forces are being trained in it the first week of training. The American Nurse Association just voted it the top intervention. And so for us to be able to have real tools and techniques like that, and one of the things, I think I heard it from Sheva, and we have just taken it as our own, is the stress does not live in the external circumstance, right? It doesn't live with your teenager. It doesn't live with your client who thinks you're available 24/7. It lives in the body. And the reason that's good news is you can't always change that external circumstance, but you can always change your physiology, especially through these tools and techniques. And there's only, our understanding, a few ways to get into coherence. One is the heart focused breathing, as you know, right? When we put our attention in the area of the heart, sends different neural signals to the brain that then tell our amygdala we're safe, right? It optimizes key brain functions. And also feeling these positive, renewing emotions. Like, this is one of the miracles of life and within the multiverse, is when we go from stress to feeling positive, renewing emotions, we create 1,400 biochemical changes, including DHEA, right? Which is literally the vitality hormone. And I'm in LA, we say it's better than Botox, right? And so, but that we have the power to do that. And we explain to these like CEOs and high performers, like, you can go do your yoga, you can do your meditation, but you still might be in a stress response. And so doing these specific techniques, and like Brett said, when they actually have that experience, but then there's something far beyond, right? Like, metaphorically, the heart has always been the symbol of love and wisdom, but the heart is really this nonlinear thing. And it's so powerful that when we get into a state of coherence, there's been thousands of studies that show others around us, a high percentage of the time, actually get in to coherence also. And we're always careful about talking about health, but separately, we've had a group called Transformational Healing Alliance. And we started it when COVID happened, literally just to support our community because there was so much fear and unknown and people felt so isolated. So we were running 30-minute virtual sessions every day, teaching people how to get in coherence and then just doing sharing. And we still do it a couple times a week. But we saw so many healings with it. And that wasn't even the intention. We saw so many healings that a friend of ours who ran clinical research at Harvard Medical School just finished a white paper on it because she wants to get it out. And she's a molecular oncologist, right? So she was in a very linear, industry, right? And so there is the linear, the 3D, where they have the experience. And then there's the nonlinear where they're like, you're not going to believe it. You're not going to believe it. You're not going to believe it. We're like,
right.
Yep, we believe it. We hear it all the time. Like, it could be around health. It could be them wanting to manifest something, them wanting to create. And in this coherent state, right, there's just something beyond. And the three of us know it because there is something around the quantum field, right? We understand quantum science, quantum physics, right? And I'm just always fascinated why we are not, as a society, so interested in this, because it's the closest thing to magic, but it's real. It's science.
Right. So marry this to, I think about this so often, and I don't even know if I can articulate it, but marry this idea of coherence to the idea that you started talking about, that so many guests have said recently on the show, that there's going to be a raising of consciousness, that there has to be. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Like, how can we say what that means? Because what often ends up getting heard, I think, is, oh, that means so-and-so is going to win this election. That means so-and-so is going to win this election, right? Like, that's what higher consciousness is. Whatever, that has nothing to do with anything, right? How do you explain this idea of a raising of consciousness, which I think also coincides with, a plugging into our each individual intuition and leading from that higher source that's in us and all around us?
Brett, you want me to?
Yeah, please go for it. And I've got one kind of example that is relevant to the work we're doing.
Yeah. So at a higher level, as we get into this state of coherence and we get out of a stress response, there's this natural process that happens where we start to feel more connected to others, right? Because when we're in stress, we're in threat, right? It's not our natural state. We're not designed to be in stress, right? We're designed to be in it in short bursts and then come back, right, into this coherent state. But when people can start to experience coherence, that's where the miracles, the magic happens, and they start to feel connected to those around them. And ultimately, one of the things around higher consciousness is to really understand that we're all in it together. And at a higher level, we're all one, right? And so how do we literally love everybody as ourselves, right? It's a big concept, right? But it really is real, right? Like all the great avatars have said that. And how do we understand everybody's a reflection of ourselves? So, it's not about, Trump's the savior, Kamala's the savior. That's separation, right? It's how do we realize like we are all one, and how do we rise above political belief and prioritize humanity above everything, right? Because we've created all these 3D man-made things that create separation. And I grew up a good Catholic boy, but like religion and even states and, the things we do culturally. And it creates division and separation. And I mean, it's such a simple thing, but Brett and I were in New York last week speaking at a conference. And it's such a melting pot of everybody existing and nobody's like questioning whatever. And so the consciousness is really understanding that we're all one. We're all brothers and sisters. Literally we're all one, right? From a quantum physics standpoint. And the more we do our internal work and move past our fears, our beliefs, our biases, which are really like, our brain's a record of the past, right? That is all just protection mechanisms and not who we are. So as we move through that, we can start to experience coherence and that present moment and that oneness. It gives us the real experience of that we truly are a part of something beyond ourselves.
And what are you contributing to the greater good, right? Are you contributing hate? Are you contributing tension? Are you contributing, anger or fear into the field? And so on a micro level, to just kind of bring this around to why the work we're doing is, we're so passionate about. If you think about college campuses today, and we, referenced earlier, just a lot of the chaos that's ensuing, right? Presidents are resigning because they're not, the heat in the kitchen's really hot around, donor beliefs and political, ideology and, who you support, one side or another, whether it's a geopolitical conflict. And whatever it is, the fear, the anger, the, self-limiting beliefs, the ego is contributing to an environment where our young adults are learning, right? I have a daughter who's a sophomore in college, and, by supporting the leaders of these universities to help them implement coherence on a regular basis, to infuse it into the way their teams operate, and then to help them think kind of beyond themselves, what can we do to support our community? So they change at an individual level, the self-evolution. They start to change at a team level. When the team is operating in coherence, now they start to say, well, what's really possible, right? The bending of time. And then they can think broader about their community, whether it's the campus or the local geographic community that they're a part of. And now you start to support the people running the institution. We can create a more coherent environment for these young people who are there, with the idea that they want to go change the world. And how do we arm them with these tools so that they're emotionally regulated when they do go off into the real world?
Oh, I love that you're doing this in college campuses because, my God, I mean, like, what this is I always say, I say to my youngest, because he's got some health challenges, and I say this almost on every podcast. I say, I don't care if you learn science. I don't care what your grade is in math. I don't care, like he does, and that's great. I care that you learn how to regulate yourself, how you learn how to manage this machine, because you've got some challenges ahead of you.
Yeah.
And you've got to be, and life throws them at us.
Yeah.
Right? They throw us at all of us.
Exactly.
So I'm thrilled that you're doing this work there. I just can't think of anything more important. So much more important than scrolling.
Yeah.
Social media.
Yeah, we had a beautiful moment yesterday. Thank you for sharing about your son. I know we've talked about him in the past. We had a beautiful moment yesterday. We did a workshop for a leadership team at a university, and when we did the checkout, one of the team members mentioned how they had been at the university for 30 years, and this was the first time that they felt like they were part of something like a team. This was like the most impactful experience they'd had in 30 years. They felt so connected to the other members of the team. It was a really powerful moment, and it's a great validator and a reinforcement for us that we are doing what we are meant to be doing, So as much as I would have loved to have been patrolling the sidelines of a basketball court as a coach, this is where I'm really meant to be.
That's where you're meant to be. Yeah. Man, listeners, I want you just to absorb this and take it in. And as Brett shared that last example, it's like, ask yourself, what is this life really about? What are you really here for? What are the moments that bring you that joy, that connection, what are you going to look back on your life and say, oh, I really wish that I had just done the dishes more. I really wish that I had, you're going to really wish that you hadn't blown up at, when my grandfather died, he said his biggest regret was yelling. He was 85, yelling at my uncle when he was 9 years old. And he said, I said to him, how could I have a son like this? Mm. And he said, he hadn't really done anything. He said, who would say that? You can't take that back. This is what he went to his grave with, right? We all have those moments where we've said things just because that's part of life, right? But learning this, right? If that's what you go to your grave with, how do you want to live your life today? So I just thank you guys so much for being here and sharing it. Is there any final words? I'm going to put all your contact information, all of that in the show notes. We can add the stuff about the coherence meetings if people want to join those. Anything else that you would like to say, want the audience to know, share about anything?
I'm just grateful that we had this opportunity to have this fun conversation with you, and that you've created this platform to just explore the boundaries, or the edges of intuition, and to be able to talk in an open forum about, consciousness and coherence and how valuable it can be, because we do get to change. Imagine if your grandfather had been introduced to these tools somewhere along the way. Maybe he wouldn't have gone to his resting place with that sort of regret, right? We actually can change. We know the body and the brain are capable.
Not necessarily because he didn't say it, but because he knew how to release the guilt.
Yeah.
He knew how to help self-love and forgive himself.
So let's do that while we're young and capable and, able to adopt it and to be able to share with other people how important they are to us, and to really focus in on, keeping the main thing, as they say, right? To really be connected at a deeper level with our relationships, and not get caught up in, some of the energy draining things that we tend to get pulled towards.
Yeah, I love that. And just with that, with you two talking, the one thing I would share is just how do we find ways to be more kind and loving to ourselves? It's such a catalyst. And we'll do exercises once we get to know a senior team, and we'll have them write down all the things they say to themselves. And then they have to then partner with somebody and put their name to each one. And you realize that you would never say things you say yourselves to somebody else. And what would allow for each one of all of us, your listeners, to be able to love themselves, to be able to just have more respect for themselves, and what is blocking that? What false beliefs? Because I think, wars are created and ego and all that because deep down people don't like themselves, right? And they're being driven by past ghosts or, whatever it is. And so how do we create a culture that, we can be kind and loving to ourselves? Because then that really is the reflection to everybody else.
And there's nothing that we can do. There's nothing I just did an individual podcast episode, Monday Muse. There are no good and bad people. And I was talking about this. There's nothing we can do that can negate loving ourselves or the need. Like, we are in the human experience. We're going to have those experiences. I don't want anybody to walk away from this conversation thinking the idea is, I just need to be better at not losing my temper. I need to be better at no, right. It's, you need to find compassion and love for yourself for your human moment.
Yeah.
And from doing that, we'll extend it to others.
Love that. Abby, thanks for having us.
Oh my gosh, guys.
You are like, this is one of the things you're meant to do.
So, right. I was thinking about that earlier. Your writing is so strong in your LinkedIn posts, and so it's a natural for you to take this into the podcast medium. So congrats on the show, and thank you for having us on.